Imagine how much different and better things could be had we not had generations of genocidal psyops and successive governments hell-bent on our own destruction, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine how much better it would be. It's easy if you try. I'm your friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell, and this is Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys, yet again with your host and friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. That intro, albeit short and a little bit off the cuff, ladies and gentlemen, was nonetheless a very deliberate choice of words, which, as you'll see when we get onto in a moment, will be very, very important to really take a look at. Because that sort of sentiment behind a certain song, it would seem, that is motivating a lot of the evil that we see going on in the world at the moment, despite the fact that it seems to hail and kind of promote this utopian ideal of utopia itself. You know, this globalist, borderless world where everybody just gets along and sings Kumbaya despite having no overlying, overhead reason to do so, no religion, no anything like this. But we'll break all that down as we move on with today's episode, because what's going on, especially in the Western world at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, Western countries, developed countries, is nothing short of generations of genocidal psyops. And we're really seeing the long-term fruits of that now, which could really bring down our entire civilization if we let it. We'll get on to all of that in a moment. Just to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and share. Make sure you have notifications turned on so you get notified when these videos go up and all of these things. For a channel that is growing and is growing quite consistently, which I greatly thank you for, ladies and gentlemen. I greatly appreciate everybody who shares the video, shares the channel all around, because as we'll get into in a moment, it's kind of risky to do so in many ways. Outside of, places where, you're kind of, I suppose, safer in a way to share this kind of stuff. A lot of people, they've fallen for the kind of stuff. They've fallen hook, line and sinker for these initiatives, which are pumped all through the public school system, state school system, that have had, their genocidal intentions in mind. So thank you for everybody that shares. Make sure you tune in on Rumble as well. Make sure to follow me on Rumble. I believe we're at 125 or 127 followers now. Be a really, really good day when not only that tips over 200, but when that tips over 1,000. I really, really appreciate that. One thing I've seen that with his recently setting up, he had his channel anyway, but he's recently started adding more to his Rumble channel. Zoom Historian, I think he went from about 400 to about 4,000 pretty much overnight followers on Rumble. It's just really, really good to see when the censorious, ban hammer came down on him. As far as I know, as I said, he wasn't doing anything illegal. He had a fully monetized YouTube channel. Very similar happened to is Robert Carter, his name is, a guy who was affiliated with the Five Pillars, the pro-Muslim outlet. As much as I may disagree with everything that he says, and would say that organization and the ideology that stems from it is a threat to all of our lives in Britain, with British customs and British people and so on. You see that little coexist banner, and then you remember that the C wants to eat all of the other letters. But as far as I know, he had a YouTube channel and it was struck down for seemingly no good reason. And it was kind of, interesting, however, how quickly Team YouTube got in contact with him on X to try and rectify the issue. And then Zoom Historian actually quoted it. And as far as I know, he actually had no response, saying, at Team YouTube, can I have some response, please? And he got no response back from it, as far as I know. But good to see at least that he's got himself set up on Rumble now, which is a much more pro-free speech and less censorious platform. So I'd strongly recommend you go over and follow me on there, if only because occasionally we have to cut bits out of these episodes, either for copyright or either for, to appease the algorithm gods or to appease the AdSense gods. So if you want to go over and watch the full unedited and uncensored stuff on Rumble as well, you'll probably find more useful stuff on there. Links down below in the description or in the show notes. Straight on with today. I'm going to play you one clip first, ladies and gentlemen, which really encapsulates pretty much everything that is going on in our countries in one neat little package. It comes from the leader of the Communist Party in Japan. But we're going to look at this video, and I want you to keep things in mind that she says as we go through the rest of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, which I think is very, very important to talk about. But the communist leader of not the communist leader, the leader of the Communist Party in Japan, outright admitted in an interview, which has not been translated, but it has the subtitles. So you might want to tune into the video if you can to watch this next bit, because the subtitles will be on screen. I'll read them afterwards. But if you want to keep up to where we are on the screen with the subtitles, because the rest of the video will be in Japanese, obviously. She admitted her ultimate goal is the complete disappearance of Japan, which is really, we should be taking that and applying that to every single leader of the communist side of the aisle, right? They want the destruction of our countries. They want the destruction of the nation state, the nation people. And she actually quotes, which is why I quoted this in the intro, John Lennon's Imagine, which really outlines this whole thing, right? This whole hippie culture that was existed at the time. We just live and let live, and love is love, and all of this stuff that was coming from those, weeded out weirdos. But they mean it. The biggest thing is they mean it, which is what we should be taking into account. And that means that they're going to flood the country with third worlders, because obviously Japan, like many other Western countries, is on a negative trajectory with regards to its own birth rates, right? And it can't support itself because obviously you have an aging population that has less youngsters to be able to take care of it and keep up the industry and so on. Then the solution is obviously to flood it with third worlders, because we all live the same. We're all the same, ultimately. We're all just completely interchangeable. Men and women completely interchangeable. Everybody's completely interchangeable from every other part around the world, which actually I'm going to bring a clip up here now, which I can put straight after this to explain why we aren't. But this is the clip in question. I'll bring it up on screen for you now. And she says here she wants to dissolve the nation state, dissolve Japan, get rid of all Japanese people for some reason. Some genocidal bent. Like I said, these people, ladies and gentlemen, they're not moral people. They're not good people at all. They want us dead, and they will pursue that aim.
むしろ究極的には国家の消滅ですから。つまりそうやって人間が本当に豊かに発達していって、何か今の例えば法律っていうのは、あるルールに国民を従わせるために作ってる部分が相当ありますよね。そういうのが必要のなくなる社会っていうのを究極的には目指すわけですから。国家の消滅を。
この国家が消滅したときに、例えばそれ
かなり究極なんで。
究極ですよね。
あまりこのイメージできないです。
わかりました。そこまでちょっっ
イマジンの世界です。ジョン・レノンの。
国家ではない。
むしろ
That really says it all, doesn't it? That really says it all. Imagine, the last thing she says there, ladies and gentlemen, if you were watching it, it's like the world of John Lennon's Imagine, which, just like it was when he wrote it at the time, it would seem, is nothing more than a figment of these people's imagination, because it will never come to pass. Because everything they want to institute goes directly against human nature. Right, we'll go through some of the lyrics where, again, it is completely, anti-religion, it's anti-nation, it's anti any kind of sovereignty, the actual song itself. If you go and read the lyrics, we'll go through some of them now. But the funny thing is, she doesn't even realize that she calls out the own incongruity of her own worldview within her own words, right? So she says, as humans, the laws that we have now, for example, in other words, as humans truly develop and become prosperous in that way, the laws we have now, for example, have a large part that's made us to make people comply with certain rules, right? We communists aim for a society where those things become unnecessary. So these rules, right, that make humans behave in certain ways, they want to abolish those rules. But yet they have to do so through an increasing system of totalitarianism and government control and policy and regulation. So they have to say, we want to get rid of the rules with more rules. So instantly you see the incongruity of the communist position, at least with the way that she's explaining it, right? They say they want to get rid of all these rules, right, by implementing more rules that go directly against human nature. They want to regulate out human nature, is what they're saying, because they know that their worldview is completely antithetical to human nature, but they don't care. They just want to be at the top of it, because ultimately the whole thing that they're after is power, control, and everything that's going to come from that. The money that they can forcibly extract you through taxation or through basically the government then occupying the role of de facto crime family. So that's what they want. Right, that's what they want. And this way they're being, completely mask off about it. We will genocide our own population if we feel that that's what's going to be needed to accomplish our aims. And she literally quotes here, as I said, John Lennon's Imagine. Some of the lyrics, which if you listen to go, this is quite a famous song. Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. This is the thing you're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, that even though you might be thinking, oh yeah, this would be great, this would be whatever, it's completely antithetical to human nature. It's completely antithetical to human nature, especially the way that society just naturally tends to form. Society tends to naturally be very tribal, right? And that then usually, or seemingly what we're seeing at the moment, more and more comes down to ethnic lines, right? And where you see everybody would be a nationalist for where they come from, right? But fundamentally, humans are not all these little interchangeable widgets and whatever else that you can just put somewhere and instantly they become that thing, whereby you can get rid of borders, you can get rid of these things, and that nothing bad is going to happen. Nothing bad is going to happen. And the other thing is, we've run this experiment. We have more seemingly borders than ever. We have more immigration than ever. We have more quote-unquote integration and assimilation and diversity and all of this utopian ideal more than ever. And we had the Britain. And we've had the native people of Britain being basically genocided out of existence via psyops and via all manner of different things, right? Everything geared towards them, removing themselves from the gene pool and bringing in their replacements. Why? Because those replacements coming in are more politically useful in the eyes of our disgusting traitorous leaders who see them as nothing more than political units. They see them as nothing more than political units. People of these nations often see those people as people, right? And that's where you see that we love our own people. It's not necessarily that we hate our own people or hate any other people from around the world. We love our own people. And that's become a thing which has become taboo nowadays for some reason. If you live in Western cultures, if you live in Britain, if you live in Europe, if you live in America, if you live in all these other places that typically are white countries, right? You're not allowed to love your own people. That's seen as fascist. That's seen as Nazi. It's perfectly fine for everyone else around the world to love their own people, right? People in the Middle East, people in Southern Asia, and all other areas which have been deemed for whatever reason, and Africa and these other nations that have been deemed to be underprivileged or systemically discriminated against or whatever. But you're not allowed to love your own people. They are, because the communists and everyone else will be cheering on the leaders in South Africa, for example, cheering on the genocide of white people, right? The Afrikaners, the Boers, right? They'll be the ones cheering on those people, the destruction of the white minority in that area. They're all for minorities until it becomes the white minority in South Africa. And then you saw the leftist talking heads when Trump brought a few of them in on the asylum system, right? Because they were actually fleeing a genocide. Oh, they can't be asylum seekers, they can't be refugees because they're white, right? But then anybody coming from any other area of the world, they're automatically an asylum seeker. If you want to know more about the asylum seeker refugee scam, by the way, go listen to my conversation with John Carr. It breaks down very well. He spent time in Africa and actually saw what a genuine refugee looks like. He explains why it's not the same as what's going on in Britain as people who are actually fleeing status. But these people, they genuinely believe that you bring people like this into your society, they're instantly going to become members of that society, or they're just as Japanese, or they're just as French, or they're just as Polish, or they're just as British, or they're just as American as the native people that live there, right? This is a video that's been going viral recently. And this is, again, no phones in sight, just people living in the moment. Imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine this, all the people living for today. Well, video's been breaking from Papua, where it seems to be a tribal clash going on. These people, ladies and gentlemen, are literally battling in the street. In fact, I'll bring this video up on screen, so it's got music on in the background. I'll just play it whilst I'm talking over it. They are literally, if you needed any more evidence that, again, not all societies are the same. You know, you can't just take people from one society and expect them to integrate into another just seemingly like that. They're literally warring in the streets with bows. They're literally on bows, and they're warring in the streets with each other. If you're watching this on screen, ladies and gentlemen, you see here they have long bows, right? And they are literally fighting in the streets, whether this is, rival tribes or whatever, literally fighting in this settlement, right? Which looks like something out of, Red Dead Redemption, the first Red Dead Redemption game, a little bit more modernized. And then literally running through the streets with swords, it looks like, to have this gang clash or whatever. These people genuinely think that these people are an asset to your society. I'm sorry, they're not going to be. It'd be like taking people from the uncontacted tribes in the Amazon rainforest or whatever, and thinking they're just going to be just as French as the next Frenchman, or just as English as the Englishman, or Welsh as Welshman. Right? It's not true. It's not true. And the other thing is, the genuine diversity that we have across the planet of people coming from different areas of the world and different cultures, in that sense, where they are in the world, right? Certain cultures, not all of them. But that kind of diversity, we see, you know, you go across the many areas, or you would have gone across many areas of the world before, and you would have seen slightly different takes on Orthodox Christianity, for example. Like you look at Orthodox Christian buildings in Russia, for example, like the churches that they have, and it looks very different in many ways to the churches, even Orthodox churches, you'll find in other areas of the world, right? Even though they all, again, the whole point is they come around that central cornerstone, I suppose, right? But this is the big thing that we're seeing here, especially in the UK, in England in particular, from YouGov, this is going to be coming from now, where the propaganda has been seriously effective. YouGov recently released a massive thread on X, and one of them is particularly important, which we'll go through now, and it's basically how, after Suella Braverman sparked debate with a column that she wrote saying, "I will never be truly English," Rishi Sunak actually branded this slightly ridiculous. A YouGov survey looked at how white and ethnic minority adults in England see English and British identity. Notice it has nothing to do with actually being a thing. It's all to do with identifying as a thing, right? So that's where you're seeing the biggest problem there with the whole identity thing. And obviously that theme goes through the whole trans ideology and everything like that. The whole thing with identity. And basically it's coming down to whether you are or you aren't. That's what we ultimately need to bring it back to. Either are a woman or you're not, right? You either are a man or you're not. You either are English or you aren't, right? No matter how you feel about it. But this is a very, very long thread, which you can go and read the whole thread with the bit that I've linked down below, ladies and gentlemen. Goes through, for example, the attitudes towards feeling more British versus English, you know, whether Englishness is cultural or Englishness is heritage, whether we should be applying more restrictive definitions, right, to Britishness or to Englishness or whatever. The one part of the poll that's really, it's buried seemingly right at the bottom of this poll, but it tells you a lot because it's gotten nearly 100,000 views. It's got more views, that's buried deep down in the thread, right, than the actual first post in the thread. So as you know, on threads on X, what you normally find is that the first post will have the most views because usually people don't be digging all the way through the threads. You know, they get bored, right? It's why newspaper outlets, if they want to try and obfuscate away something, but they still don't want to leave it out because then they'd be lying by omission. They hide it in like paragraph 18 or something like that, right? They did that with the whole thing of Axel Rudikamana apparently having anti-Islamist material, but they still said about 18 paragraphs down, the Sky News article, which we talked about a good while ago, that he still had what was being referenced as the Al-Qaeda training manual. Okay, so again, they'll bury it down in there if they want to try and push these narratives, right? I'm not saying YouGov are doing the exact same. So this is, in fact, I'll bring this up on screen. I'll bring this up on screen for you now. So this is the first page of the poll, right? The first page of the thread. So there's some of the things which we're looking at. You'll see here, ladies and gentlemen, that the first post in the thread has 45,000 views at time of posting, right? Then you go down, this is all the way down in the thread. In fact, it'll take a little bit longer to go through the segment now, but I'll count them. So not including the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the 12th one. So not including that first slide, which I just showed you, 12 more down after the next one, right? So this would have been made the 13th or 14th slide. It has over, or nearly, at time of recording, again, I bring this up now, and there's a reason why, ladies and gentlemen, it is an important one. We do need to talk about it. This one, which is, again, about 12 slides down, has over nearly 100,000. So double, over double. And I'll bring this up on screen for you again in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. It is because it is around what is increasingly, the more and more you try and think about this logically, the more and more you end up coming back around to this point where, at least in Britain, and at least in European countries, you will inevitably run up the ethnicity question, and an integral part of that is the race of the inhabitants. That is just the reality, right? And this part has gotten so much attention because it really highlights the effectiveness of the propaganda campaign that has taken place over successive generations. Genocide by cartoon is what I'm calling it now, because of something which I will bring up in a moment. I haven't got the actual article in question, but because of the blatant way that history is being misrepresented to fuel a false agenda. Most white adults in England who say English identity requires family heritage don't mean it in a racial sense. Most ethnic minority adults with the same view do think you have to be white to be English. The percentage of each group who say being English requires family heritage say that you have to be white to be English, right? And this is the actual data. You would have seen this because I just brought it up on screen just now. It says here, white born in the UK, 28%, ethnic minority born in the UK, 63%, and ethnic minority born abroad, 54%. That's what this looks like. So if I bring this up on screen a little bit bigger, just check, make sure it's okay on screen. Can you see it? Okay, right. Let me move. In fact, hang on. Here we go. I'll fade away and we'll talk over it this way. Here we go. So most white adults in England who say English identity requires family heritage don't mean that in a racial sense. Most ethnic minority adults with the same view do think you have to be white to be English. And it says here, somebody can only be considered English if they are white. And white adults who say who were born in the UK say English requires family identity. English requires family heritage, 28%. Somebody can be considered English regardless of their ethnicity, 64%. And then the remaining 7% say that they don't know, where it is the complete opposite for ethnic minorities. It's showing there that seemingly one group is willing to acknowledge reality, the other one has been programmed not to acknowledge reality because it's been deemed not safe for them to do so, right? The propaganda campaign, this person highlighted in the in the comments very well, the majority of ethnics, i.e. ethnic minorities, actually recognize that they aren't and will never be English, right? Because their ethnicity, their DNA, everything down to their very bones and their blood will point to somewhere else, right? Yet white, so I love that insult, I absolutely love that insult, have been conditioned to deny that their ethnicity exists. The propaganda has done its job, and that's what we're seeing here. That's where public school system has been funneling this propaganda through for decades, and that's now where you see things like this. You see images now being posted like this to try and convince people, right, namely the native populace, and this is what's being pushed through schools, right, completely false propaganda to try and say that people of these different heritages have always been here. For those of you who aren't watching but are listening, you're seeing a cartoon depicting Britain or Scotland, in this instance, what would have been around, the early times, probably about 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, and it has ethnic minority people with the native, symbols and stuff like that, a lot of pagan symbols on the ringlets around their arms and stuff like that, seemingly doing like, I don't know, some kind of hair braiding, or what it looks like he's gouging. It looks like it's, Cyril Garn's baguette fingers going in Tom Aspinall's eyes. Not gonna lie, it's a Celtic guy of red-headed appearance here, right? Long hair, typical appearance of what would have been considered, somebody from Celtic or Scottish or possibly Anglo-Saxon, ancestry from that time, depicting everybody as always being here, when you'd never, ever have seen these people in this country unless it would have been some kind of invasion, right, for the most part. You only need, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the truth. I don't say this with any hatred in my heart for anybody, but this is just the truth. And you're going to see this highlighted in this GIF here, this file here, which I'll bring up a little bit bigger on the screen in a moment, you only need, in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, to go back less than 100 years. Less than 100 years to see that this is not true, let alone 1,000 years, right? This is a graph. You'll find this link down below. Well, it's a GIF highlighting the scale of ethnic replacement in the UK. Go back to 1951. It's 99.9% white. And then you're seeing it decrease systematically by design over the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. It never was. And this is the biggest thing, ladies and gentlemen. You can say this without hatred in your heart for anybody, without dehumanizing people unnecessarily. But the notion that Britain was always multicultural, was always diverse, right, is a complete and utter fiction. It is a complete lie. And it's undeniable at this point that more and more people have been voiced here that large swaths, right, they've been, literal, violent unrest over these things. It's been forced on people without their consent every single time. And me and Joe Marsh spoke about this. By the way, you'll be able to get that conversation in full. If you missed the premiere on Wednesday, it's coming out tonight for everybody on all platforms. Friday, the 14th of November currently at 6 p.m. I might have to delay it a little bit, or you might be seeing this episode go up directly after that conversation. So stay tuned. You'll either be seeing this first, and you'll be seeing my conversation with Joe Marsh if you stick around for the second premiere, and then it'll just stay up on all platforms then very soon, or you'll be seeing this afterwards. In which case, hope you enjoyed that conversation. Leave your thoughts down below, and obviously leave them on that video as well, right? But otherwise, wait until the end of this episode, and then go and enjoy that. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. And Britain has been made, it's undeniable at this point, more unsafe, less trusting, right, than it ever has been. And the thing is, exactly as the communists said, they want to get rid of all the rules around human nature. They've had to bring in all of these other rules, right, that in many instances, they go on about protecting democracy and all of this stuff when they outright say, as one of the Plaid Cymru representatives, Helen Feichen, said recently, they said that if it suits their political agenda, they're not going to listen to the majority on racial grounds, mind you. Plaid Cymru are a racist party against white people, right, against the natives of Wales. And what that graph also showed, ladies and gentlemen, is that, again, it's not racist to say that the native people of these isles are white, because the biggest thing is if you trace it back, you will inevitably find that the native people of these isles are white. It's that simple. You only need to trace it back 80 years to see that that is true, let alone 1,000 years. And yes, we've had different groups of similar related genetic peoples, right? At the Norman conquest, and you have Anglo-Saxons were a mix of all different, quite closely related groups from fairly closely related countries in terms of their ancestry, right? Then you have Celts, and you have Scots, and so on. All this relatively closely related. Nothing in the way that the communists want to represent, in which case every human on the planet is exactly the same, thinks the same way, is completely interchangeable, and is exactly the same thing of every other ancestry and whatever else as any other human person. It's just not the case. You only need to go back 80 years to see that. Because if you trace ancestry, and if you trace the history back in these lands far enough, you only need to go back 80 years to see that the whole myth that we've been sold about diversity and multiculturalism and all these things is simply not true. Is simply not true, that you've been taught to deny that your own ethnicity and your own people are a people. And that dehumanization campaign has been the goal in order to perpetuate a genocide against these people, a genocide by replacement. A genocide by replacement, because they want to get rid of us because we're not as politically useful. They actually got to, politicians actually got to follow through on what the people want, right, in this instance. But the people coming in from elsewhere in the world, often coming from places where they don't have it quite as good as us, they're happy just to live off the state. They're happy to live this life of comparative luxury off the back of the taxpayer, who's increasingly becoming more and more of a serf, right? See, politicians sold you out to foreigners because those foreigners come back, they'll vote for them. But the serf, right, the taxpayer, will not vote for them, but they don't care. They'll just bring in a larger voting bloc so they don't actually need to cater to you anymore, all the while extracting more and more taxes from you, all the while more and more regulating you, and all the more and while telling you how much of a bigot and intolerant and racist you are. Somebody who I think is going to have a serious, I don't know what you want to call it, red pill or whatever moment. You often see, ladies and gentlemen, that our political class are trying to not bring these people to their own constituencies. Rachel Millward, which we'll go through in a moment, has been really going hard on the propaganda campaign, even going as far, has been memed the f*** out of it, and rightfully so, to call the people coming over into these camps as lawyers and doctors and surgeons and all the rest of it. And then rejecting 600 of these men being placed in her own constituency because they never thought they would have to deal with these people in non-PR advert form, right? That's the biggest thing. They're having a shock of their life now because people like Rachel Millward, who say refugees welcome and all of this stuff, never ever thought they would have had to deal with these people face to face. They never ever would have thought that. And that whole thing about being acquainted with them in non-advert PR form was a tremendous comment I saw from Morgoth. You'll find it in, obviously, the relevant post link down below. But James McMurdock, who's an independent MP, I believe, for South Basildon and East Thurrock, recently had his home broken into by a delivery driver. Remember that Scottish lady a little while ago that we talked about who had her home broken into by a delivery driver, and he hit her so hard that she had a miscarriage? That very, very easily could have been James McMurdock's family. Luckily, he was home. I've got video of it, ladies and gentlemen. An Amazon delivery driver let himself into my home. It was lucky that I was in the right place to confront him immediately, but it shocked me, and the question keeps coming back to me is this: what if my wife or teenage daughter had been standing in my place? The footage is clear. The driver approaches the door, breathing heavily. He checks the handle and pushes his way inside. I don't know what his intentions were, and that is exactly the point. The biggest thing is, ladies and gentlemen, why James McMurdock should have been able, if he hasn't already, because I know you can get it in this country, you can get gun licenses and stuff like that. We don't have anything resembling a Second Amendment or anything like that, but you can get them, right? I think depending on your circumstances, I'm not familiar with the exact laws. It's exactly why. Perfect case for the Second Amendment. This is somebody who had no business being in his house, tried to force himself into his house. Could have just been his wife and his mother, wife and teenage daughter there, in which case even more imperative that they have something to equal the playing field in a fatal way, because they are not going to be at this, they're going to be at a physiological disadvantage, right? The police, well, you can't rely on the police, and justice has to be administered by the intended victim. Trespass is a civil matter. There's nothing we can do. That's what the police's responses were. Under current law, if a stranger walks into your house, the police may not attend. At a time when delivery companies are hiring thousands of temporary drivers, who was turning up at your doors? The same surgeons and doctors and all of these other lawyers and stuff that Rachel Millward touts how great they are, right? But yet won't have them in her constituency. Even then, what if this guy had gone in, hadn't gone straight back out the door like the footage shows, instead had been able to overpower James? What if he was much bigger and was able to overpower James and subdue him? Render him unconscious or whatever, or kill him? He's then got the whole family at his mercy, right? And all the family have at that point is, I don't know, maybe a blunted kitchen knife, right? The way that these people want to say that, oh yeah, we need to blunt knives to fight knife crime and all the rest of it. And maybe being able to all gang up together, but even then, why should he have been put in this position? Why should he have been put in this position? But here's the footage from his Ring doorbell camera, ladies and gentlemen. You can see as well, it's a tremendous advert for remigration, put it that way. You can see here the driver is at the door. He's rung the doorbell at this point, and he just tries it and goes inside. And James, you can actually hear, I've muted the video, but he actually says something to the guy, like, what the hell are you doing? And the guy's like, oh, smile, like, oh, I didn't know, I wasn't doing anything. Yeah, of course. You can see he sort of half smiles as he's coming back out. Just goes to show that companies are obviously not vetting who they bring in. But I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, going back to what we talked about before with the YouGov stuff, what do you think? Or maybe I should say, where do you think? Now, the guy's name, I have no idea who it is. I don't know anything more about this. Anything more about this person, right? But I think based on what you can see here, we have a fairly good idea. Fairly good idea as well, because people have this. People have this experience with delivery drivers where they're seeing delivery drivers turn up delivering stuff, whether it's food or whether it's packages from Amazon and all this stuff. They're not people who they know. They're not people who they recognize as being of their people anymore. And people are noticing it. People are noticing it, even if they're too scared to talk about it. People in my comment sections talking about it. You know what I mean? And this is, again, by design. This is seemingly the imported slave labor, which I thought we were meant to be against slavery. We're so good in the world. We're so virtuous and all of this stuff. Yeah, we have more slaves in the world than ever before. More people being trafficked than ever before. And then you think, oh, maybe the open border system's not exactly doing much to combat that. You know what I mean? Wouldn't have this problem if these people weren't here, it would seem. And obviously, yes, you can have instances where it can be people of these isles, but per capita is a thing. This is the video I was going to talk about now, ladies and gentlemen. This is the massive glaring hypocrisy and why such a astroturfed or such a false campaign going on with these people at the moment. Do you see Zach Polanski recently that was brought on stage by the Rizzle Kicks? It was like the most friggin' astroturf cringiest thing that I'd ever seen, right? They try to push this guy to the moon. There's nothing organic. There's nothing organic about it, I swear to God. But one thing that that is more of like a Freudian slip, if you will, was Rachel Millward's reaction when she heard the news that there was going to be 600 of these, lawyers and doctors and surgeons being put in her constituency. And needless to say, she then wasn't so happy. She wasn't so ecstatic about refugees' welcome anymore, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to show you this, because this is tells you all you need to know about the Greens, where they are literally like just they encapsulate the worst of what people see going on in Britain at the moment. The whole thing with the Greens is literally, this is the Greens. This is the Greens. A liberal female, a weak homosexual man, and a foreign Muslim. Yet they're going to bring real hope and real change to Britain. Of course they are. Of course they are. This is Rachel Millward outside of what would have been similarly like a camp or whatever for these doctors and surgeons. Just have a listen to it, ladies and gentlemen. The hypocrisy is astounding.
So I'm here outside the training camp where the Home Office has decided to temporarily house 540 asylum seekers. What struck me most, actually, from this first site visit is the stories from the Home Office staff of the asylum seekers in other sites. They're talking about surgeons and doctors and lawyers, people who come from Eritrea or Afghanistan, or all kinds of different places, who really should have the right to work, to contribute to our society, to be better integrated for their own well-being and for our communities, to pay tax, to be able to rent their own accommodation, to be able to get...
Not so fun when they actually turn up in your constituency, Rachel, when it's not in PR advert form, is it? Not so funny, is it? But she then went on to say asylum seekers are welcome here, despite then saying that seemingly they weren't welcome in her constituency. In another one, ladies and gentlemen, where she went on to regurgitate all the same leftist talking points. This is her when later on when people were calling her out on it and having tremendous laughs, myself included, at her expense. She went on and doubled down on it. Here's what she had to say.
Fundamentally, I do not think we should be housing asylum seekers in camps. And people say, well, what should we be doing? And I'm like, well, asylum seekers should have the right to work. And that would mean that people could come and they could integrate into our society. They could bring skills that we need, actually. These, there are doctors and surgeons and, barbers and all sorts of different people. And they could come and bring those skills and integrate into our society and then pay their way and have that dignity. And that would be better for their well-being and better for our communities. Having hundreds of people...
But yet the native people already being put out of jobs, especially within the NHS, they don't get that same privilege, ladies and gentlemen. They don't get that. They don't get that same privilege. Is one of the things I commented under Rupert Lowe's statement when he was talking about, you know, the NHS, you know, having so many people in there that can't even speak basic English and stuff like that, and the fact that it is getting people killed. I commented both the links under his post to the conversation I had with Justine Winter, which I think is extremely important. It's been one of the most vocal ones on rogue nurses and all manner of others, and the fact that they've been importing Nigerians basically like it's going out of fashion, despite the fact they're not trained, they're not able to do the basic things right, and they're putting the fear of death, many of them putting the fear of death into their patients, right? So, yeah, forgive us, Rachel, for not buying it. But did you notice there, ladies and gentlemen, the subtle thing is that many people I don't think have picked up on, or some people have, but they don't seem to be making it as big of a deal as, in my opinion, that they should, is that it explains the con of the asylum system, and I don't think people like Rachel even realize that they're doing it. When they're saying things like they should be able to come here, rent, pay tax, all of this other stuff. They should be able to integrate all of this stuff, you know, all of these supposed doctors, and we've got a great example of a doctor and a surgeon that are going on in the next example, ladies and gentlemen. But they should have the right to work. They should have, you know, they could integrate. They could bring the skills that we need, which we really don't. We were perfectly fine as it was. We founded as an ethno-state we started as an ethno-state, the Industrial Revolution. We never needed people from around the world to do it. In many instances, we're bringing in people from the world, from the rest of the world, that are still literally fighting with bows, and arrows, right? We seemingly have nuclear weapons and, you know, the attack choppers that could, you know, if we wanted to, wipe all of these other civilizations off the face of the map, face of the earth, and we don't do it. Quite benevolent, it seems. You know, we get how evil the white man is. Quite benevolent, it would seem. But it's outright saying here that the asylum policy, the asylum system that we have, is not an asylum system. It's an immigration system. I think that's what people are not realizing, is that every single thing ties back to immigration fundamentally. These people are not asylum seekers. They're being brought here under an immigration policy. So whenever you hear people say now on the left saying that a nation of sanctuary is not an immigration policy, it absolutely is. So you're giving people the right to work, to pay rent, or to pay taxes or whatever. Literally the one that they're leaving out quite deliberately, it would seem, is right to vote. Right to vote. And we already seen, there was an article which I can't remember where I read it, but it was in Ireland that the government was caught giving quote-unquote asylum seekers the right to vote. It's all geared around destroying your democratic rights, ladies and gentlemen, as a native Welsh or English or Scottish British person. Native British person. But that's there where they're saying here that they're touting how great these asylum seekers are and all of this stuff to try and get people to accept them coming here because they see it as part of immigration. They're lying to you when they say that they're asylum seekers. They're absolutely lying to you. An asylum system, the asylum system that we have at least, is not actually going to people that actually need it. Otherwise, it seems we'd be giving sanctuary to our white South Africans, right? To white South Africans that are being targeted and genocided by their own government. Video I saw that drove me mad recently was a woman, liberal woman, being interviewed in the street. She said, why does it matter if the whites become a minority, right? You should look at the white South Africans in South Africa and see why it absolutely would be a problem, especially when we've spent, via our own propaganda and via our own cultural attitudes and via the state system, telling these people how evil the white man is, but how they need to grovel for the rest of eternity for the things that the supposed sins their ancestors did, all of these things. So you think these people are going to be coming here with reverence for us? We've spent decades showing our arse to the world and being like, look how evil we are, we're so sorry, your whole world come and have a go at that. And you think then people are not going to take advantage of that? And that's where we've seen that more people, Lenny Henry and the supposed great examples of integration, you know, Diane Abbott as well, saying that the UK should pay trillions in reparations, even though we had only finished paying off our debts to ending the slave trade, mind you, in 2015. And I had nothing to do with the slave trade. The fact that nobody living today had anything to do with the slave trade. So why are we paying for it? And not to mention, people who are here today had nothing to do with the slave trade either. It wasn't them that were in chains, right? Being sold like cattle, basically. Yet obviously they're just trying to get more and more and more for themselves. And we're not going to be able to stop that, or we're not going to be able to end this cycle, right, if we continue, in many ways, being nice about it. Our empathy has been weaponized against us. Maybe we should think a change in tactic. Quote-unquote asylum seeker, ladies and gentlemen, was allowed to remain in the country. This is from The Sun, titled Mum's Agony. Why was he allowed to be here when a 15-year-old girl was raped by an asylum seeker? Sorry, doctor. Sorry, lawyer. Sorry, surgeon. With 11 previous convictions. The Sun won a legal battle. They had to fight a legal battle, mind you, to reveal that he was an asylum seeker, which let's just call it now immigrant. We have to at this point. She said her family will never recover from the horror attack by Amin Abedi Mofrad, who was only jailed for 12.5 years. This guy, ladies and gentlemen, this is who, when it comes to her own constituency, she's not so, quote-unquote, refugees welcome. But this is the doctor, the lawyer, the surgeon that has ruined the life and ruined the family of one of ours in this country, I think. I think it's in Britain. Just double check to make sure it's in Britain. So I know I covered I think it was the same video that I covered a little while ago of Ben Leo was talking with an American person, seemingly out in America. I believe it was about this case. But it was in Britain. He'd been jailed for 12.5 years. He had 11 previous convictions in Germany, and he was allowed to roam our streets. The Iranian predator, 35, dragged the girl down an alleyway as she walked home from an under-18s club night in Oxford on Valentine's Day last year. And he was convicted of assault that last month. The victim's mum said the Home Office was also responsible to the attack as he arrived illegally on a small boat in 2023 and was arrested on suspicion of assault that year, but the case was dropped over lack of evidence. 11 previous convictions. Yeah, remember that guy that we talked about on the last episode, ladies and gentlemen, where he said that he spent 5 years in prison in France and now he was going to the UK and inshallah. See how empathy is not going to solve this problem? And again, I reiterated last time, and I still stand by it, because I've seen some people saying some things about certain issues with regards to immigration and immigrants and whatever that I don't necessarily agree with. Point being is that there is a difference between people like this and people that have come over here genuinely looking for a better life. I don't think necessarily they should be treated the same, even if the overall outcome needs to be the same. I don't want to wade over then into pure ends justify the means territory. That's my personal position at the moment. I hope maybe you guys can give me your perspective on these things. Like, I think the person that has genuinely come over here from, wherever, just pick a place in the world, maybe just set up like a business or whatever, even if you agree he or she and the family, whatever, shouldn't be allowed to be here. I've seen this whole thing with Shamima Begum and stuff like that at the moment, where no surprise, you've got foreigners campaigning for Shamima Begum to be allowed back here, even though she made her bed when she went out to join a foreign terrorist organization, as far as I'm concerned. But you have people over here that are committing terror attacks, rape, all of this stuff, 11 previous convictions, right? This would be a perfect guy to make an example out of. The guy, and I'm saying this because it's on the Sun article as well, one who tried to rape a girl in Cardiff, assaulted her, and luckily she was able to get away. Make an example of. Right, these people, make examples of them, right, as far as I'm concerned, right? I say that again with my, reservations around the death penalty, which a video from Rupert Lowe perfectly encapsulates my, not grievances, but concerns about state-implemented death penalty at the moment, which, we're already doing it for the elderly and the babies. We might as well do it for the criminals, right? But then people who've come over here, they've set up a restaurant, they come here from areas of the world where they do have a lot of respect for native culture. You can look at, for example, like Japanese people and stuff like that. They have a, very respectful attitude. And you see that when they go to like the changing of the guard in London and they're actually being respectful. A lot of them are tourists, obviously. I don't think they should be treated the same. So I don't think the cases are equivocal, even if the overall outcome of reversing immigration needs to be the same. I don't think they should be treated the same. Again, when you end up going into ends justify the means territory, you end up with some really bad things on both sides of the political spectrum. Because both sides, the extreme sides of the political spectrum, ultimately come back to that ends justify the means. So hopefully we won't end up going down that route. But then when you have people, as we're looking seemingly at the next government incumbent in Wales, in particular, Plaid Cymru, you have Senedd member Heledd Feichen saying that under the anti-racist Wales, which, let's just face it, that just means white genocide Wales, that's what it's going to mean, it will be achieved by not listening. Again, these whole defend democracy, right? Defend democracy from the authoritarian Trump. We're not always going to be listening to the voice of the majority if they're all white voices. What does that tell you, ladies and gentlemen? We're not always going to be listening to the voice of the majority if they are all white voices. So basically, we're not going to be listening to the Welsh people. That's what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen. The whole Protect Democracy crowd ultimately showing that they only subscribe to Lenin's version of democracy, Lenin's version of complete and functional democracy. It just means our way or the highway. This is how you know really that Plaid are an anti-Wales party and further than that are anti-white racists.
We're not always going to be listening to the voice of the majority if they are all white voices. If we are serious about being an anti-racist Wales and we seriously want to see that happen, there will be disagreement, and we're not always going to be listening to the voice of the majority if they are all white voices. And certainly in terms of seeing responses such as this, I think one of the very important things in terms of the consultation is that we see who responds. And if there is opposition, from what viewpoint is that opposition coming? And it was just a painting on the wall for me, but when Black Lives Matter emerged as a campaign, I then came to understand, because of my privilege as a white person, that I wasn't aware of the history, the problematic history of that portrait.
Outright showing there that they support a, again, anti-white racist terrorist organization in Black Lives Matter. And this just goes to show how dangerous it is. Because she seems to genuinely believe this. That's where these people, they're not doing this by accident. They have a zeal. They want to destroy their people. And they think it's good and virtuous to do so. So, ladies and gentlemen, call me whatever you want. This is a matter of survival. This is a matter of survival for the Welsh people and for the British people as a whole. Right? These people, like as you've seen with the Japanese communist leader, would happily destroy Wales and the Welsh people to pursue their political aims. They'd have to destroy everyone off the face of the country. Everyone off the face of the earth. And again, for all of the protect democracy stuff from Trump's authoritarianism and all of this, they're openly saying there that if the voice of the majority was a quote-unquote white voice, right, or white voices, we're not going to listen to them. Could the sham of democracy be any more clear, at least with the way that it's been implemented here? Now again, I provided it's implemented well, I don't necessarily think that democracy would actually be a bad system. Right? There's conversations we need to have around universal suffrage and stuff like that. Absolutely. And I'm saying that as a person that at this present moment in time would be deprived of that say. Right? But that doesn't make the truth, that doesn't change the truth. My personal experience in this regard doesn't change the truth. So this is who we put in government, ladies and gentlemen. The absolute worst of people, it would seem. And that was clear, as I mentioned, with Rupert Lowe's example, where he was voicing this he was misquoted by the BBC and has been issued a full apology, which, is quite surprising that they issued an apology. When he said that he called for the death penalty of foreign criminals and I can't remember what it was, but he said he called for the death penalty for domestic and foreign offenders. But the BBC didn't report that he said that it was for domestic offenders as well, trying to imply that he was calling for the death penalty for only foreigners, and he's since been issued an apology for that. But this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when he raised the death penalty issue in Parliament, which it does seem at the moment is a popular policy. I have my reservations about it for precisely this reason, as you'll hear now, and hopefully the audio mixing, the audio cleanup that we do isn't going to take it out. If I can, you might... there we go. If it does, ladies and gentlemen, you won't need to worry about it because I'll put the actual video as an edit in afterwards. They'll support the death penalty for the elderly, innocent elderly, in order to deprive them of the benefits and pensions that they were entitled to across all of their working life. They'll support abortion up until birth, so they'll support murder of the most innocent in our society, namely the unborn children, right? The most innocent. But yet you have grumbles, groans, and all of this stuff when they want to introduce it for criminals. This should show you, ladies and gentlemen, exactly where our politicians stand on the issue of justice and morality and all this, namely on the side of evil.
The reintroduction of the death penalty for both foreign and domestic criminals should be put to the British people in a legally binding referendum.
Did you hear it, ladies and gentlemen? Did you hear it? If not, I'll play it for you again now, and also in the editing section if the audio thing does its thing. Listen to this. Listen to the reaction at the introduction of the death penalty, reintroduction of the death penalty for foreign and domestic criminals.
The reintroduction of the death penalty for both foreign and domestic criminals should be put to the British people in a legally binding referendum.
Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. There's no other words for it. Absolutely disgusting. That just shows you exactly where they stand. They're more concerned with appeasing criminals and showing compassion and empathy to criminals than they are with the killing of their own elderly at the end of their life so that they don't have to pay the benefits out that they're owed and the pensions that they're owed, so that they can use it to fund more hotels and give it to more foreigners, their desired voting bloc, right? And then the most innocent in our society, the unborn children, right? Yet when you want to say, oh yeah, let's off some criminals, they have serious qualms with that. Shows you a lot, doesn't it? And ultimately, everything that we're seeing here, like we saw with the first example of the Japanese communist leader, a Labour MP, has now basically gone on TV and said, yep, we're not going to be doing anything that we said that we would. Everything that we said that we would do or whatever, we're not going to do. We've had to break manifesto commitments. We're going to break the manifesto commitments. We never should have done. Like, oops, oopsies. We never should have made those manifesto commitments. Oopsies. Nothing bad, right? We're all good. We're all good, right? Native British people and everything. Yeah, you're still going to vote for us. Yeah. Oh, if not, we'll just import more. It don't matter. Don't worry. But yeah, we're not going to do anything that we said we would. You know, all the things that got you to vote for us, even though only a minority of you voted for us. Yeah, but we're just going to go ahead and do whatever we want. We're accountable to no one, which is ultimately how obviously they see it, right? So Labour MP, where's his name? Chris Curtis, I believe of Preston or Preston. I'm not exactly sure where he's from, but I believe it's on BBC Newsnight. And he says, we're going to have to break manifesto commitments. We shouldn't have made those things. We're probably going to have to increase income tax. Just goes to show they never ever cared about keeping their word, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that they've done, it seems that they said that they were not going to do. Right, but ultimately, a lot of us already expected this. A lot of us already expected nothing but lies and broken promises from Labour, right? Because especially in Wales, the last 26 years, that's all we've been given. That's all we've been given, pretty much. And now they just openly, they feel comfortable enough saying this on national TV.
No, they didn't have to make those commitments at all. I doubt it moved the dial in the slightest.
So are you frustrated that this has now become this enormous political issue because she's going to have to break the manifesto?
We probably are going to have to make the manifesto commitments. We shouldn't have made those commitments, but look, we are where we are, and where we are is probably going to have to raise taxes, probably income tax in the budget, but we're going to have to do the right thing, and we're going to have to make sure we build up enough fiscal headroom so that people know that this is the last time and the last budget that we have to make difficult decisions, and we need to continue all of the work to ensure that we get the British economy.
No, they
didn't have to make that.
They've lied, they've broken promises, they've lied, they've now openly said that they're going to need to break more promises and break their election manifesto commitments. Why should we believe them that this is going to be the last time that they're going to have to do that? Why should we believe them that this is going to be the last time that they're going to have to do that? It's just complete and utter. This is absolutely shameless. This is absolutely shameless. I don't even know what to say. The first female, was it Chancellor of the Exchequer or whatever it is, or Treasurer? I can't remember what exact role she is. It's little I even care at this point. The whole point about her, though, being the first woman to do it, the first woman to get there, and this is where we are. Smashing the glass ceiling, feminists. Smashing the glass ceiling and smashing the country to pieces as you do so. Smashing the already smashed reputation of your own party into pieces as well. Well done. Well done. You should be extremely, extremely proud. The whole thing with this, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that feminism being a serious problem. It is a serious problem. Because the whole thing has come from the whole feminism and DEI and pushing people into places where they shouldn't belong. And that ties back into immigration and all this stuff. Is you get things like this. You get things like this where you have women in male prisons guarding male prisoners. Now, tell me how that would ever make sense. If you think that it's because it doesn't make sense, you are right. And that's the whole thing with diversity, equity, inclusion, and all this stuff. It absolutely does not make sense. It absolutely does not make sense. And this got exposed recently because we've had yet another instance of female prison officers in male prisons shacking up and doing criminal activity on behalf of the quote-unquote prison bad boys, right? Isabel Dale, which you probably already know what she looks like, ladies and gentlemen, and if you've seen the story on X and so on, you already know what she looks like. Textbook example of maybe a person that you should not put in a position like this with often very high testosterone, primarily driven offenders, right? Is the textbook case of DEI and the fruits that it comes from. And the best part is, it still does that. She's not even, minority ethnic, right? But the Daily Mail reported, given her look, nose piercings, false eyelashes, acrylic nails, and platinum blonde hair, the then 19-year-old had no shortage of admirers. 19. As a prison officer working amidst 420 hardened criminals in an all-male jail. Let me just have a look, the level of the prison she was working at. She was working, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are not familiar with the story, HMP Coldingley in Surrey. It's a Category C men's prison. Category C men's prison, mainly focused on prisoner resettlement, is Category C, it would seem. So what did she then get called in front of court herself for? And I believe then later charged and convicted, if I'm not mistaken. I think she's actually facing time in prison now herself. Within 6 months of starting, the teenager, whose previous work experience was a sales assistant in Marks & Spencer, had embarked on sexual relationships with not one but two inmates in the prison, and there could have been many more. One of them was Connor Money, a 28-year-old jailed in 2020 after speeding away from police at 140 miles per hour, then crashing his car and running away, leaving his passenger to die at the scene. And his passenger did indeed die at the scene, as far as I'm aware. The other was Shahid Sharif. He was locked up for 12 years for the armed robbery of a jeweler's, during which he threatened to maim passers-by with a bottle of ammonia. If you were wondering, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually fairly important. You might be wondering what that name means. It's not a British name, obviously. And there's no evidence to suggest what religion he may belong to, right, at this present moment in time. No available, concrete evidence, but he was spotted coming outside of the multi-faith prayer room with Isabel, having, adjusted her bottoms. They were caught on CCTV. It's quite obvious what happened in that prayer room during the 4 minutes of them going in and then coming back out. Shahid, a name being of Arabic origin, often means witness or martyr, and then Sharif meaning noble. Noble martyr. That's what she was shacking up with. She was shacking up with noble martyr. Despite knowing that the relationships with prisoners were not allowed, within months of starting at the jail, Dale was involved in sexual activity with both men. She was caught on CCTV emerging from the multi-faith prayer room and adjusting her clothing, having spent 4 minutes alone inside with Sharif. The 34-year-old convict messaged her later. This is yay, we get to hear some prison pillow talk, ladies and gentlemen, via text, it would seem. It was good sharing that love today. Your pussy's amazing. That's the level of stuff we're talking here. Mills and Boone, it certainly was not, but Dale was hooked, penning love letters, praising his rapping skills, and gushing she would take a bullet for him. Now, this is the key thing now, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, these are images that are publicly available in the paper in question, so... Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I know we're not supposed to make assumptions or anything like that, but would we really think that this person was qualified? At 19? To be dealing with hardened male criminals, 420 of them to be precise, which is a funny coincidence in and of itself. In a Category C prison? I don't think so. And here she is then openly declaring that she'd take a bullet for the sweet-talking... noble martyr who had done 12 years for robbery. Real incident here is that this is where, again, how easy it is for, seemingly with the immatureness of her own position. This is why, again, she should not have been anywhere near this position. So with the Joey Barton stuff, Eni Luco, you could argue, should not be anywhere near her position, right? So that flagrant with regards to basic maths that she seemingly couldn't do on television. I felt that from the beginning, the prisoners had more respect for me than the staff did. Tell you why you felt that way, Isabel. They wanted into your pants and they were successful. You're dealing with criminals here. And now they've gotten you involved in your criminal activity and now you're facing time in prison. Is that showing respect for you? No, of course it isn't. She wasn't mature or serious enough. I did wonder how she managed to get through training. The feeling was that she was very insecure. Which is not surprising for a new prison officer, but her way of coping was over-familiarity with the cons. It all starts with the con asking for a favour. It can be anything, something really basic. They become very manipulative, and once you've crossed the line, you're trapped. Is that how you respect a woman? Is that showing respect for a woman? Is that showing respect for Isabel in this instance? No, but hey, it's the fruits of feminism. This is sexual liberation. This is, breaking the glass ceiling, showing the man, right? Do you know that you can do a job just as good as a man can do? And now, as I mentioned, I believe she's now facing time in prison herself. Because she was also not only found guilty of 2 counts of misconduct in a public office, and 1 of conspiracy to convey a List A prohibited article into prison. And a lot of these love letters, I believe, had drugs contained within them, like they would be used to smuggle drugs and stuff like that. So now you're supposedly feeling you had more respect or whatever from these smooth-talking, manipulative con men, these criminals, right? And now you're facing prison time yourself because, they had so much respect for you that they made you into a drug smuggler and a harlot. Well, you made yourself into a harlot as well, obviously. Maybe 19-year-old, face pierced, heavily tattooed with seemingly questionable maturity on social media, not the best characters to make prison officers. Certainly in male prisons anyway, but that's why, in my opinion, it's quite obvious that women shouldn't be guarding men in the first place. Should be guarding men in the first place, because let's face it, you need to have a certain amount of men on that force anyway, because otherwise, the prisoners, if they wanted to, they could take over the entire place and the women could do all about it if they wanted to. Unless you're going to keep them locked down in their cells 24 hours a day anyway, which obviously they're not going to, but there's differences between men and women, if you remember, ladies and gentlemen. There's differences between men and women. So, hopefully, this will now begin, with more and more examples of this, will be the beginning of the end of the whole push for diversity, not only diversity in like an ethnic sense or whatever, But an understanding, maybe, that in general, men and women were meant for certain things, certain roles, and that is integral to a well-ordered and functioning society. And actually, they're not a bad thing, they're very good and virtuous things. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, for today, number one, seemingly not good and virtuous thing is the way that the government is squandering the British taxpayers' money. This is something that came as a really big shock, and whoever, the cancellation for today coming at the end of the episode is whoever signed off on the £5.2 million of British taxpayers' money that was sent to Ethiopia to develop the quote-unquote Ethiopian spice skills. No, I am not lying to you, ladies and gentlemen. That is an actual thing that our government spent money on. The millions, tens of millions that the Welsh government is spending for trees in Uganda, right? All of the foreign aid, the 19 million that they can spend in Pakistan to try and combat child abuse, but they can't even spend an iota of that, and not even just the time attention to solving Pakistani-induced child abuse in their own country. £5.2 million of British taxpayers. I'll mention all the others that go to promoting LGBT inclusivity in Pakistan or whatever else, right? The Ethiopian spice skills, which aim to enhance the role of women through music and performance. This goes to show the government is ultimately responsible, but the university's pushing through these garbage education products, which Charlotte Gill is a great example if you want to know more about that, but queer performativity and all of this stuff, and how Newcastle University had this big thing about combating stereotypes and queerness and all this stuff. I can't remember the exact one it is. The universities are pumping through these programs to the tunes of tens of thousands of pounds per project, per PhD project, right? Every single semester. This is got to be into the realms of like hundreds of £1 million in cons, or at least tens of millions of pounds in cons, on our domestic soil, the way that these academic institutions have become so ideologically corrupted. But then you have 5.2 million being sent to Ethiopia to develop the quote-unquote Ethiopian spice skills, which aim to develop and enhance the role of women through music and performance. I think I speak for at least the vast majority of people when I say I don't think the British public should be funding to the tune of any price for any reason enhancing the role of women through music and performance by funding the Ethiopian spice skills. This is just emblematic of the government will seemingly do everything other than tackle our actual problems. And I'm wondering, what the hell they have to gain from this? Where's the money being laundered? How is it getting back to them? What are they doing? They're giving it to the Ethiopian leadership, it would seem. What are they getting back from them? Presumably more of these doctors and lawyers and surgeons and gynecologists and all the rest of it, right? I'm just going to let... I can't even speak. I'm just going to let the clip play for itself.
It's a bit like... Are we going to be spending money to North Korea next, or Russia? Where does it go from here?
And also sending money to the Chinese to teach them how to grow rice is a bit like them sending us money to teach us how to make fish and chips or something. It's ridiculous. Anyway, just before we go to break, for your edification, Dr. Kisley, £5.2 million in 2017 went to Ethiopia to help them develop or create their own version of the Spice Girls. Their Ethiopian girl band was called Yegna, which means hours in Ethiopian. So, you know, that's a good use of our money, isn't it?
What do viewers think of that? I'd love to know. If people could phone in, I'd really love to know.
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. Listen to the doctor, folks. What do you think about this? I mean, specifically, we're talking about...
I don't think they're going to have the same impact, same cultural relevance. I'm reading the comments on the post, ladies and gentlemen, because I was trying to think up some funny, because you have to laugh or you cry. You have to laugh or you'll cry. There's plenty of things to cry about, but, you know, stiff upper lip, and in many instances, laugh about it as a coping mechanism. Laugh your way out of depression in many instances. Somebody put in the comments, Ethiopian Spice Girls, what are they called? Rice, sand, and flip-flop. I was trying to think up some funny ones, but yeah, I don't know enough about Ethiopian names and culture and whatever else to try and think up some funny names. I tell you what, I hope Stephen Crowder gets hold of this story. He tends to be being quick-witted and being able to think up some funny things with regards to things like this. But this is why the clip that I put up on YouTube earlier was about the UK being a laughingstock on the world stage. We imprison people for memes and speech, right? We have foreigners dominating all of our public positions, right? There's you go on TV, you very rarely see a British person anymore. We have been possibly the biggest purveyors of civilizational suicide through our governance, right? Through this true leftist emasculation, right? And we are being mocked for it. We are a mockery on the world stage. We are a mockery on the world stage. Funny enough, somebody commented on one of the shorts I released a little while ago, literally yesterday, saying that, yeah, I'm a Brit living in the US and Britain, the UK, is an absolute laughingstock. But the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing really to be laughing about. All this is happening. There's gangs operating right now. Literally, as I'm saying this right now, and as you are watching it right now, there's a rape gang preying on young girls somewhere, right? There's police in cahoots with them. There's a victim of these rape gangs crying with her family because she's having flashbacks about all the things that she went through and the fact the National Enquiries are being done. There's somebody languishing in prison for a meme, right? Someone in prison for something which they said on social media, or somebody being stalked or followed by police, somebody having an undue call from police. There's people languishing in hotels that shouldn't be here, that linger at the window or lingering outside the hotels, preying on children, illegal delivery drivers, and so on. It's possibly a woman being broken into a house right now by a delivery driver to have her be and her baby have a miscarriage as a result of it. It's no laughing matter. All the while, many people from these areas of the world openly champion our destruction, literally saying, if you don't like us here and if you don't like the way that it is, then off to another country. This is your home. No, it's not your home. It's our home now. And we don't care whether you like it or not. It's us or them. And it is a matter of life or death, ladies and gentlemen. That's the untold story of £5.2 million of British taxpayer money being spent to Ethiopia to fund the Ethiopian spice girls. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr, thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr, we'll see you next time. And either if you've just seen my interview, which would probably be the way that it's going to go with Joe Marsh, it's coming out very soon, then hope you enjoy that, and hopefully then you'll be able to tune in for this either straight after, or maybe you'll be seeing this before, I don't know. Have a good one, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.